15 years of marriage didn't end with a shout. They ended with the dry, impersonal chime of a FedEx notification. I was sitting in my home office, in our perfect house in Wellesley. Outside, it was one of those flawless New England October days. I was staring at 3 monitors, trying to keep control of the deal of my life. A $20 million funding round. I could almost taste the victory. The adrenaline was pushing back the exhaustion. Only 3 more points to finalize with the lawyers in San Francisco. The phone on my desk vibrated. I glanced at it, annoyed at the interruption. A push notification. FedEx. Your package has been left at the front door. I frowned. I hadn't ordered anything this week. I was too busy to breathe, let alone spend money. Jessica? She used Amazon or Net-a-Porter. FedEx was for documents. For work. I opened the Nest security camera log for the front door. The app obediently showed me the last 30 seconds of footage. A courier in the blue uniform. He placed a white cardboard mailer on the doormat. He left. I zoomed in. The return label was clear. Jenkins Laboratories. Austin, Texas. I copied the name and pasted it into Google. My hands were moving on autopilot while my brain was still editing the contract. First link. Jenkins Laboratories, a leader in genetic testing. I scrolled down. Services, ancestry. Disease risk. Paternity testing. My heart, which had been pumping steadily seconds before, suddenly slammed against my ribs. Loud. Just once. Paternity testing. I stood up. My legs felt strange. I walked out of the office and down the second-floor hallway. Downstairs, in the kitchen, Jessica's voice was bright. She was laughing. I walked down the stairs. She was standing at the marble island, perfect, as always. Beige cashmere sweater, hair pulled back in a neat bun. She was in her element, on the phone, planning another charity dinner for the Children's Hospital. She was the face of our success. I was the bank account. She saw me, covered the receiver with her palm, and beamed. She threw me a standard greeting, asking if everything was okay. Her eyes were already back on the guest list on her iPad. I didn't answer. I opened the front door. There it was. The package. I picked it up. It was almost weightless. It was addressed to her. Jessica Green. I went back inside. She waved at me, still deep in her conversation. I went upstairs. I went back into my office. And I turned the lock. The heavy oak door clicked shut. Why did I lock it? I never locked my office door. I sat down in my chair. My $20 million funding round was forgotten. I stared at the white envelope. My hands were shaking. I found the letter opener and carefully slit the package open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded in 3. Official letterhead, heavy bond paper. At the top, the same logo. Jenkins Laboratories. Below that, the header. DNA paternity test report. I read the lines, but my brain refused to assemble them. Participant 1, Mother Jessica Green. Participant 2, Child Oliver Green. Oliver. My son. Our son. He's 9. He has my eyes. My habit of frowning when he's solving a problem. And the third line. Participant 3, alleged father Stephen Collins. I read it again. And again. Stephen Collins. My name is David. David Green. I skipped the technical text, all those markers and loci. I looked at the very bottom. At the bold print. Probability of paternity, 999%. Conclusion, Stephen Collins is not excluded as the biological father of Oliver Green. Date of sample collection, 3 days ago. The air left the room. The office, my perfect, sunlit office, began to shrink. I heard Jessica laugh again downstairs. 10 years. She had cheated on me 10 years ago. She got pregnant. And she let me raise him. She let me be there in the delivery room. She let me teach him how to ride a bike. She let me love him more than I had ever loved anything in my life. All this time, she knew. Or she suspected. But why take the test now? 3 days ago? What changed? I sat there, staring at the piece of paper that had just destroyed my reality. My deal, my millions, all of it turned to dust. There was only one question left. A question that drowned out the pain, drowned out the shock. A question as cold as a surgeon's scalpel. Who the hell is Stephen Collins? I locked the report in the safe behind the painting. I couldn't breathe. I heard Jessica finish her call downstairs. Her footsteps on the stairs. I quickly cleared my browser history and closed my eyes, pretending to be meditating. She opened the door just a crack. She asked if everything was all right, if I needed anything. I told her no, I was fine, just a headache from all the negotiations. She nodded, said she was leaving for her committee meeting, and closed the door. The sound of her Range Rover pulling away was deafening in the quiet house. I sat in that chair for an hour. Maybe 2. My $20 million funding round? I sent a short email to the lawyers. I told them I needed a break for a couple of hours, that a sudden family matter had come up. They must have thought someone had died. In a way, someone had. 10 years ago. I forced my brain, so used to code and logic, to sift through dead data. What was happening 10 years ago? It wasn't a year, it was hell. My first startup, Logicore, had just imploded, burning through all of our savings. We were living in a tiny rental apartment in Somerville, and I was a ghost. I sat at an old laptop for days on end, obsessed with my failure, trying to write the code that would save us. I was broke, angry, and humiliated. Jessica was there. I remember that. I remember her crying at night, thinking I was asleep. She would ask me why I didn't talk to her anymore. She begged me to just go for a walk. She told me she felt incredibly alone, that I had pushed her away. And I remember snapping. I remember yelling. I demanded that she leave me alone. I yelled that I didn't have time for her feelings when we were about to be evicted. I told her to grow up. She got quiet after that. And apparently, she found someone who would listen. I went downstairs. The house felt cold, even though the thermostat was set to 70. Her MacBook Air was on the kitchen island, next to her perfect to-do list. She was always proud of our transparency. I opened it. The password. I typed in our wedding date. 06/18. 2010, the screen unlocked. That transparency, it seems, had always been a one-way street. I opened her email app. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel the pulse in my ears. I sat down in her chair. The search bar. I typed the name that was now burned into my brain. Stephen Collins. About a half-dozen emails popped up. All from the past month. I opened the first one. From her. Subject, long time no see. She wrote that she thought of him often. That she had randomly seen his picture in Boston Legal magazine and was so happy for his success. She asked how he was doing. Innocent, polite, a little bit of a flirt. His reply was the same. Polite, but cool. He wrote that it was good to hear from her. That he was doing well, was married, and had 2 kids. I opened the next email. From her. Sent 2 weeks ago. She wrote that she had to confess something important. That she couldn't live with it anymore. She wrote that 10 years ago, during the hardest time of her life, when David, that's me, was in a deep depression, she had made a terrible mistake. She wrote that Oliver might be his son. Stephen's reply came 10 minutes later. Panic. Shock. He demanded an explanation. He asked why she had stayed silent for 10 years. He demanded proof. And then I found the last email. Sent yesterday, the day before the results arrived. It was to Stephen. She wrote that she understood his shock. She wrote that the test was just a formality, so they both knew the truth. But she needed him to understand something. Her situation was very complicated. She wrote that David, was on the verge of a giant deal. He was about to close his funding round and become obscenely, fairytale rich. She wrote that she couldn't leave me right now. She wrote that it would ruin everything she had worked so hard to build. She wrote that they needed to be very, very careful. I read that email 3 times. I Googled him. Stephen Collins. He was her first love, from college. The Steve she sometimes mentioned with a laugh. Now he was a senior partner at Ropes & Gray, one of the top law firms in Boston. A home on Beacon Hill. Successful. Rich. He was everything I wasn't 10 years ago, but I was, finally, about to become. She hadn't reached out to him a month ago because of love. She did it because he was rich, too. And I was about to be. She wasn't getting a DNA test to find Oliver's father. She was getting it to see whose stock was worth more. This wasn't an act of desperation. It was a cold business audit. She was weighing her assets. The old rich lover versus the new rich husband. All my pain. All my tiny, nagging guilt over that terrible year, it all evaporated. It burned away. All that was left was cold. Pure, hard cold, like the frozen Massachusetts ground in January. She wasn't a victim. She was a player. And she had just placed her bet. She thought she had a choice. The old rich lover or the new rich husband. She was looking at me, at our life, like a stock portfolio that was ready to be diversified. All my pain, all the shock, all the guilt I'd carried for being a bad husband 10 years ago, it all vanished. All that was left was an empty space. Cold, hard, and perfectly clear. Like ice. I was no longer her husband. I wasn't the victim. I was an engineer. And there was a virus in my system. I was going to isolate it. I closed her laptop. Quietly. I didn't bother clearing my search history. It didn't matter anymore. My funding round. 48 hours until the signing. That was her deadline. She was waiting for the money to be in the bank. She was waiting for my signature on that deal to turn her lie into a multi-million-dollar divorce settlement. She thought I was an idiot. She thought I was her boring asset, the one that was finally paying off. I went back to my office. I sat at my desk. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I didn't call a divorce lawyer. That would be too obvious, too emotional. I called John, my corporate attorney. My voice was calm. I told him I needed to urgently restructure my founder's assets. Before the signing. John was quiet on the other end. He told me that was insane. He reminded me the signing was in 48 hours, that the investors had already approved all the paperwork, that it was practically impossible. I told him to make it possible. For 20 minutes, I explained what I needed. I didn't go into detail. I told him it was for long-term estate planning and it was non-negotiable. I wanted to create a new, irrevocable blind trust. In whose name? He asked. In Oliver Green's name, I said. The Oliver Green Education Trust. It sounded respectable. I told John to transfer 80% of my founder's shares into it. Immediately. John pushed back again. He asked if I understood that I was giving up control of the majority of my own net worth. I told him I understood perfectly. For the next 3 hours, I wasn't closing a funding round. I was performing surgery. The lawyers and I worked at a furious pace. Jessica had always been proud of staying out of my boring business. It was her favorite line at dinner parties. She would laugh about how she didn't understand my numbers, how she was responsible for the beautiful part of their life. Years ago, she had happily signed a full power of attorney for me to manage all our finances and assets. She was bored by contracts. That boredom was about to ruin her. By evening, the documents were ready. John sent me the final package. I printed it out. 20 pages of dense, suffocating legal text. And one single sheet, the last one. A spousal consent to asset transfer. I took that sheet and placed it underneath a different stack of papers. Real, boring tax forms from the IRS that actually did need to be signed before the deal. I heard her Range Rover pull into the garage. I heard her come inside. I heard her call for Oliver. I walked out of my office. She was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of Chardonnay. She smiled at me. The same smile she used on my business partners, the one to get a donation for her charity fund. She asked how my day was, how the negotiations were going. I told her it was great. I told her I had fantastic news. The signing was moved up. It was tomorrow. Her eyes flashed. Just for a second. The glint of a predator seeing its prey take a wrong step. She asked if it was really true, if it was finally over. I said yes. Almost. There was just one last formality. I held out the stack of papers, with the W-9 form on top. I said the fund's lawyers had sent over the final tax documents. That it was standard procedure, I just needed her signature as my spouse. She took the stack. She skimmed the first page. Her eyes glazed over with boredom. She sighed. She asked where she needed to sign so they could be done with this. I calmly turned to the last page. The one. I pointed my finger to the line above my name. She picked up a pen, carelessly scribbled her perfect Jessica Green, and pushed the papers back toward me. She didn't even read the header. She had just signed away her claim to 80% of the fortune she was planning to steal. She asked if we should celebrate. Maybe order in some dinner. I looked down at the signature. The ink was still wet. I told her yes, of course. That was a wonderful idea. I suggested we go to Mama Maria tomorrow night. To celebrate our future. The next day, the deal was closed. The papers were signed, the handshakes were done. On paper, I was a multi-millionaire. All day long I answered congratulatory calls while my corporate lawyer was busy filing the paperwork for Oliver's trust. I felt like I was operating a complex machine from the outside. My emotions were turned off. Only my brain was working. That evening, we drove to Mama Maria. Her choice. Our favorite Italian restaurant in the North End, crowded, loud, smelling of garlic and old wood. It was the place we went to celebrate. Our anniversaries. My first big sale. The day we found out Jessica was pregnant. She was at the peak of her beauty that night. The black silk dress I had bought her in Paris. Her hair was done. She was glowing. She thought this was her victory. She thought she was celebrating her future. She ordered the most expensive wine on the list, a Brunello di Montalcino. She flirted with the waiter. She held my hand across the checkered tablecloth. Her skin was warm. Mine was ice cold. When the wine arrived, she raised her glass. She said she wanted to make a toast. She looked me right in the eye. Her gaze was a mix of triumph and some kind of condescending tenderness. She said that she was so proud of me. That she had always believed in me, even in the darkest times. That we had earned this. That we were finally at the finish line. I didn't lift my glass. It just sat on the table. I just looked at her. And I quietly asked, "We?" Her smile wavered. Just for a moment. She asked what I meant. I didn't answer. I silently reached into the inside pocket of my suit jacket. I took out my phone. I placed it on the table, between the bread basket and her wine glass. Her eyes locked onto the dark screen. I pressed play. It wasn't a loud recording. But in the noise of the restaurant, you could hear it perfectly. I had left a digital recorder under the seat of her Range Rover that morning. It was her voice. Low, confident, conspiratorial. A voice I had never heard before. She was talking to Stephen Collins. She was telling him to just be patient. She was cheerfully reporting that David, that's me, had finally signed all the papers. That the deal was closed. That now they had leverage. She was planning to wait a week or two, to let the dust settle, and then she would tell me. She was calculating out loud how they would get half of everything. She laughed, saying I wouldn't even know what hit me. She was making plans for their future. The three of them. Her, Stephen, and Oliver. I pressed stop. The restaurant suddenly felt very quiet. Or maybe it was just in my head, maybe all the sound had disappeared except for the rush of my own blood. I looked at Jessica. All the color drained from her face. She went as white as the tablecloth. Then gray. She was staring at the phone like it was a snake. Her lips parted, but she couldn't seem to get any air. She whispered my name. I told her, very quietly, that I knew. I told her the report from Jenkins Laboratories had arrived yesterday. And that I had opened it. She started shaking her head. Just a reflex. Her eyes weren't filled with shame. Not with regret. Her eyes were filled with the pure, animal terror of being caught. She started stammering something. That it wasn't what I thought. That I didn't understand. I leaned across the table. All the noise of the restaurant vanished. I told her that I understood everything. I understood about Stephen. I understood that she was waiting for me to sign the deal so she could cash in on her 10-year-old lie. I understood that she was planning to take half of everything from me. I paused. And then I added that she wasn't getting half. She wasn't getting 10%. She was getting nothing. I explained it to her. Calmly, like an engineer explaining a breakdown. I told her about the papers she signed yesterday. The boring tax forms. I told her about the Oliver Green Education Trust. The blind, irrevocable trust that now held 80% of my shares. Shares that neither she nor I could touch until Oliver turned 25. I watched the terror in her eyes curdle into confusion. She couldn't process it. She was too focused on her own plan. And then she understood. She understood that I had trapped her, using her own greed against her. She understood that her signature on that page had just cancelled her entire life. I flagged down the waiter. I asked for the check. Jessica just sat there, like a statue. She wasn't crying. She was just staring into space. I paid the bill in silence with my credit card. I stood up from the table. I told her she could finish her wine. I told her that when she got home, her things would be in the driveway. That I had already changed the locks. That the alarm system was already rerouted to my phone. That if she tried to get in, I would call the police. I told her it was not her home anymore. I reached into my jacket pocket again and pulled out 2 folded sheets of paper. I placed them on the table, next to her untouched glass. I said the first paper was the bill from Jenkins Laboratories. That she had paid for it with our joint credit card, and I expected to be fully reimbursed. And the second, I said, was an official eviction notice. You are absolutely right. I missed the final and most important part. My apologies. Here is the complete and correct version of Act 5, with the concluding section fully adapted. I'm sitting in my office. A month has passed. It's quiet. The house feels huge, echoing, like an empty cathedral after everything holy has been carried out. My divorce lawyer, a real shark from downtown Boston, left her with nothing. Jessica tried to challenge the papers she signed in my office. The judge, I was told, almost smiled when my lawyer presented the notarized spousal consent. She tried to make a claim on the house. But the prenup, the one we signed 15 years ago when I didn't have a dime, the one she had long forgotten about, was ironclad. She lost everything. Oliver is with me. He's sleeping upstairs in his room. He doesn't know anything. To him, his mom just got sick. She needs to live somewhere else for a while, until she gets better. He asks me almost every night when mom is coming home. I tell him soon. I lie to him every day. How am I going to look him in the eye in 10 years, when he demands the truth? I don't know. But I do know that his trust fund is safe. His future is secure. Yesterday, Stephen Collins called me. I didn't expect that. I thought he would yell, threaten me, demand to see Oliver. But his voice on the phone was just tired. Broken. He said he had no idea about her plan. He swore he didn't know about my stock, about the funding round. He said Jessica contacted him, and he just wanted to meet his son. To know he existed. And I believed him. There was no lie in his voice. I realized Jessica wasn't just playing me. She was playing him, too. And right then, as I was listening to him apologize, a cold thought hit me. How did I not see it? If Stephen wanted to meet his son so badly, why didn't he fight? Why did he back off so easily? Because he doesn't know. He doesn't know that Oliver is his son. I opened my desk drawer. The report from Jenkins Laboratories. 999%. I opened her email again. Her conversation with Stephen. I found what I was looking for. An attachment. A PDF file she had sent him, the same day she received the real report. I opened it. It was a different report. The same logo, the same letterhead, all of it perfect. But the result was different. Probability of paternity, 0%. Conclusion: Stephen Collins is excluded as the biological father. She faked it. She lied to him, too. She lied to everyone. She was playing a game where she held all the cards. I'm sitting in the silence. And I realize that I am the only person on the planet who knows the whole truth. I look at the picture on my desk. Me and Oliver, fishing last summer. He's smiling, holding up a tiny vase. I take a lighter from the drawer. I hold the flame to the real report. The paper turns black, the name Stephen Collins curls up and turns to ash. I won the war. I protected Oliver. I destroyed her. But I just realized that the price for this victory is a complete, suffocating loneliness. And this silence is the only thing I have left. And that's the whole story. If you enjoyed this story and want to keep hearing more like it, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any new episodes. Please remember, your support is truly important and helps this channel continue to grow. So, what do you think? We just heard a story of cold, calculated revenge. David didn't just get a divorce. He destroyed Jessica financially and socially. But did she deserve that? Many people might say David is a hero who protected himself and his son. But let's look a little deeper. He used the same methods she did: deception, manipulation, and cold calculation. He tricked her into signing those papers. Does that mean he became just like her? Can you ever justify the total destruction of a person, even if they betrayed you first? And here is the biggest question: did David have the moral right to burn that DNA report? In doing so, he essentially stole the truth from Oliver about his real father, and he stole the truth from Stephen about his son. What's worse, Jessica's lie, or David's silence, which will now last a lifetime? Let us know in the comments what you would have done in his place.